church of Smyrna. And unto the angel of the church of Smyrna write these things, saying, The first and the last, which is dead and is alive, I know thy works, and thy tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich. And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews, and are not, and are of the synagogue of Satan. Fear none of those things which thou shalt suffer. Behold, the devil shall cast some of you into prison, that ye may be tried, and ye shall have tribulation 10 days. Be thou faithful unto death, that I will give thee a crown of life. He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says unto the churches. He that overcometh shall not be hurt of the second death. So this would be the second church of the letters to the churches that Jesus wrote. Smyrna, the word myrrh has a Hebrew root which translates to death. Myrrh has been known as a bitter gum that came from trees known in the Middle East and other parts of the world. In the Bible, it was used as a perfume in Psalm. It's used for and you could relate that to Psalm 45:8. Holy anointing of the priests. It can be found in Exodus 30, verse 23. It was used in purification of women. You can find that example in Esther 2:12, and embalming wounds in John 19:39. If you go back to the book of Matthew, the Magi priests, which came from Persia at the time, carried certain gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And what that is gold would represent royalty, the Lord's royalty, or Jesus' royalty. Frankincense would be priesthood, the Lord's priestly deity, and then myrrh, the suffering death, of his suffering death. And it's interesting, in the millennial reign, the Lord receives these gifts, only he doesn't receive myrrh, which means he died once for all. And you can find that in Isaiah 60, verse 6. The Lord always is known as the first and last, the Alpha and the Omega. Referred in the Bible 7 times. Interesting number 7. In Isaiah 41:4, Isaiah 44:6, Isaiah 48:12, Revelation 1:11, Revelation 1:17-18, Revelation 2:8, and Revelation 22:13 at the end of the book. It's kind of interesting how certain books of the Old Testament tie in with Revelation. Almost all the books of the Old Testament do so, which is kind of fascinating. The commendation, I know thy works and tribulation and poverty, that thou art rich, and I know them that say they are Jews, but are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. So we'll go to the part about them being rich and poor, or being in poverty. But he does say that they are rich. It's interesting that the churches that thought they were doing well weren't performing as well as they thought, and vice versa. So I'm sure this church felt like they were probably dealt a bad hand, but the Lord honored them and glorified them. In fact, if you look at it, there were no concerns to this church. It merely just says to just hang in there and endure. The word tribulation in the Greek, it means to a press or pressing together, pressure, opposition, affliction, tribulation, distress, straits. Poverty in the Greek is a state of nothingness, or it basically implies beggary. Throughout Jesus' ministry, he did tell that we would be subject to tribulation. Not necessarily the great tribulation, but just tribulations and trials as Christians. One of the early church fathers was known as Polycarp. who ended up being burnt alive at the stake. One of his quotes, he said, 860 years have I served him, and never did me wrong. How can I blaspheme my king who has loved me so? That was one of the last words they said before they burned him. Polycarp, he was the second generation of the church, appointed by John to kind of lead Smyrna at the time. It's interesting that persecution has always followed the church, some in some form or fashion, be it in the spiritual realm or in the physical realm. The early church suffered persecutions from the Jews, even oddly before even the Romans became, obsessed with taking them all out. He had in the book of Acts, the Jewish sects of the Pharisees and Sadducees would persecute the apostles at Antioch in Acts 13:50, Iconium, Acts 14:25, Lystria, Acts 14:19, and Thessalonica in Acts 17:5. Those are just some references you can look up. Like I said, there was no concern, just merely just to hang in there. The exhortation, fear none of these things that shall suffer. Behold, the devil shall cast some of you into prison, that you may be tried, and ye shall have tribulations 10 days. Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee the crown of life. So it's interesting, 10 days. There's a lot of times, even when we think of days, we just think of a 24-hour period of the day. But there's also days of weeks, days of months, days of years. There's a day of years in the Hebrew where it talks about sabbatical years where they let the land rest. And there's always feast days and times of a month and stuff like that. So it's interesting that they have 10 days, and it's kind of speculation, but they speculate that 10 days could have meant when the Romans began persecuting Christians, and there are 10 regimes that kind of went through, beginning with Nero. Nero is very famous in history at starting the persecution of the church. Then there was Dominica, Trajan, Marcus Aurelius, who burned Polycarp, Septimius, Maximus, Decius. These are all long names. Valerian, Aurelian, and Diocletian. They ruled from 554 AD to 313. But these were 10 regimes that, in that period of time, really heavily persecuted. So that's probably what it means by 10 days. I'm sure it'll also have a certain prophetic implication down the road, but who knows at that point. Then it goes into the promises of the overcomer. He that overcometh shall not be hurt of the second death. There's a lot of death in this church, but they endured to the second life, and it's kind of interesting that it brings that up. Personal applications. 2 Timothy 3:12. Yea, ye and all that we live godly in Jesus Christ shall suffer persecution. Jesus said that in this world you will have persecution. Why would we be subjugated to that? There's several reasons. To glorify God. Daniel had that in Daniel 3:16, 18, and even in the lion's den at 24:25. For discipline of sin, sometimes we reap what we sow. There's examples of that in Hebrews 12:5 through 11, James 4:17, Romans 14:23, and 1 John 1 through 9. It can be used to help prevent us from falling into sin. 1 Peter 4:1 through 12, or 1 through 2 in 2 Corinthians 12, 7 through 10 can give you an illustration of that. To keep us from pride, Galatians 4:15 and 6:11 allude to that. And to build up our faith in 1 Peter 1, 6 and 7. So it'll also help kind of prepare us to disciple others. If we go through some hard times, we can minister to those that are going through those times. It helps us, become more credible. But that's it for the Church of Smyrna. It's a very brief letter, and I think it's because it's just so to the point, and it was kind of just a dark time in history, but they did overcome, I think. And as Satan switches tactics, and you see that in the next church, where he can't just defeat him by opposition directly, he subvertedly goes through and tries to do it internally.